Watching TV has changed over time. Streaming has become the new norm. That's why Golden State Media Concepts television podcast dives headfirst to the world of cord cutting. Want to be on the loop of what's hot in Netflix? Or if it's not a preference, what about original shows in Hulu? We've got you covered. Join us as we fill in the blank and talk about movies to stream and what show you should be binging. This is the Golden State Media Concepts television podcast.
Hello. You feeling all right, Jack? Good. All right, let's do it. Hello and welcome to the GSMC Television Podcast. We're part of the mighty GSMC Podcast Network, and I'm your very hot, less humid host today, Howard Fletcher. And I'm joined, as always, by my trusted engineer, Jack the Black Pug. And we're positively honored and thrilled to be here with you once again. If you're new to the show, I'd like to give you a very warm welcome. I'd like to thank you for giving us a try. We know that there are a plethora, there are a smorgasbord of podcasts out there, of media out there that you could use your time up watching or listening to. You did not have to choose to be here with us. We appreciate it. Stick around. I'm sure you're going to hear something that you like. We want you to keep coming back. We will make it worth your while. And if you're one of our loyal return listeners, you know how we feel about you. You're truly the reason I'm here. Let's have some fun. So let's get started. We have another jam-packed show for you today. The Peabody Awards. Yeah, they've been awarded. I'm going to go over them. Kind of exciting for some shows. A couple months ago, I went over the list of nominations, and now we have the final list of 30 winners. I'll go over some of them. I don't have time to go over all 30. Not all of them pertain or have anything to do with television anyway. J.K. Rowling, the Harry Potter author, well, she's conjured up a firestorm on Twitter. The series I recap on Friday, the Starz series Hightown, well, they got some very good news I'm going to share with you. I will always bring you updates when they break. You know I'm good for breaking news, and I'll be recapping the latest episode of Showtime's Billions. It's the 7th episode of the season. This is the 5th season, and it is called The Limitless Shit. Yes, that's what it's called. So, without any further ado, let's get started with some breaking non-binary news. Billion star Asia Kate Dillon, the first gender non-binary performer to play a non-binary character on a major television show. Well, she made headlines in 2017 when they asked the TV Academy to clarify its gender distinctions. Dillon has since then entered in the supporting actor category and has been nominated as Best Supporting Actor in a Drama Series at the Critics' Choice Awards. Dillon was recently asked to take part in the SAG Awards, that's the Screen Actors Guild Awards Motion Picture Nominating Committee. But in an open letter to SAG, to the awards committee, and the awards committee members are Jo Beth Williams, you might remember her from Poltergeist and other movies, Daryl Anderson, Jason George, Elizabeth McLaughlin, and Woody Schultz. Dillon said they'd first like to see the kudos done away with for gender-specific categories. Now, that's why I'm using that pronoun first. When I say they in this piece, I'm usually referring to Dillon. So I hope you understand that. Here's Dillon's letter to the committee. Dear Jo Beth, Daryl, Jason, Elizabeth, and Woody, I hope you are all safe and healthy. In a letter I dated on June 1st, dated June 1st, 2020, you reached out notifying me that I'd been selected to serve on the 27th Annual Screen Actors Guild Awards Motion Picture Nominating Committee. The categories you asked me to participate in judging are female actor in a leading role, female actor in a supporting role, male actor in a leading role, male actor in a supporting role, cast in a motion picture, and stunt ensemble in a motion picture. I received your letter today, June 10th, 2020, and I apologize for my delayed response, which will focus on the acting categories you have asked me to judge. In late 2016, I publicly came out as non-binary, meaning I'm not male or female or man or woman. I use they, them, their pronouns. If you Google my name and, quote, acting award categories, end quote, you will find that I've been calling for an end to segregated acting categories. Separating people based on their assigned sex and or their gender identity is not only irrelevant when it comes to how an acting performance should be judged, it is also a form of discrimination. Not only do your current categories erase non-binary identities by limiting performers to identifying as male or female, man or woman, in parentheses, which not all SAG members like myself do, but they also serve as an endorsement of gender binary at large, which actively upholds other forms of discrimination, including racism, the patriarchy, and gender violence. The distinction between male and female acting categories was implemented as a mean of combating the chronic and systematic overlooking of cis women, particularly white cis women, when it came to acting awards. This was despite the fact that there were no other categories similarly revised, as in directoress, I like that, best female or male director, cinematographer, sound designer, etc. I say particularly white cis women because it's important to note how dangerous it has been to defend the separation of male and female acting categories, as well as other award shows' use of the actress category as being motivated by wanting representation for all women, cis and trans alike. In fact, Black, Indigenous, trans, and disabled women are still the most underrepresented groups at any award show. Yet, if the Screen Actors Guild, or the Academy, or the Emmys, or the Critics' Choice Awards decided to combat that underrepresentation by representing Best Black, POC, Indigenous actress in a leading supporting role, that action would resoundingly read as what it was: racist and discriminatory. In April 2017, when Showtime wanted to submit my name for Emmy consideration in the supporting category, I engaged in a conversation with the Emmy board that felt encouraging at the time. I asked them to clarify if actor and actress categories were intended to separate people based on assigned sex and or gender identity. I was told that Emmy rules state that any performer can enter either category for any reason. Since the word actor is gender neutral, a gender neutral word meaning theatrical player that does perform, it is the word I've always used to refer to myself. I asked to be submitted under the supporting actor category. When the Critics' Choice Awards later took it upon themselves to nominate me within the supporting actor category, I felt respected in my identity. Now I recognize, however, that being submitted or nominated within categories that reinforce gender binary should have been met with my outright rejection of those nominations alongside calling for change. Not only is it possible to combine all of your leading and supporting nominees in the same gender-neutral categories, there is a precedent. On May 7th, 2017, I presented the first gender-neutral acting award to Emma Watson at the MTV Movie and TV Awards, noting, quote, "It's so cool to be here presenting the first acting award ever that celebrates performance free of any gender distinctions. Tonight we celebrate portrayals of the human experience because the only distinction we should be making when it comes to awards is between each outstanding performance," end quote. To return then to your invitation, I would be thrilled to serve as a judge, provided you take immediate action to combine your acting awards into gender-neutral categories. This courageous and overdue step from my union would send a wide message to SAG, not only supports me, but supports all its non-binary and gender non-conforming members. I look forward to your reply with love and solidarity. Asia Kate Wilson, they, them, theirs. Well, I wanted to read that, not only because I agree with it as far as the evaluation of acting. I just thought it was very well written. I hope it, for those of you who aren't interested in this, I hope it didn't bore you. I like Asia. I also said it talked about it because Aja K. Dillon is on a show that I recap every week, which is Billions. I think she does a very good job. The only thing that I would not look forward to is the fact that the number of awards would be reduced. What I would suggest they do, if they do get rid of the gender differentiations, is maybe make the category more open as far as genre. So, for instance, it would be Best Actor in a horror movie, Best Actor in a drama, Best Actor in a comedy, best, along those lines. And I do think that those need to be maybe looked at as well, because to talk about other types of snubs, I think very good acting performances that are in comedies are often overlooked. Comedy doesn't seem to be as well respected as drama as far as acting ability is concerned, and I would argue, and many would, who are in fact thespians themselves, that sometimes it takes a little bit more skill to make folks laugh. So that's how Aja feels about that. Thought it might be interesting to you. Since we're on awards, here's some breaking news from the Academy Awards. The Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences has announced that Academy Aperture 2025, the latest efforts to increase diversity in the film community, including plans for more inclusive Oscar race. Now, this obviously seems to be the issue du jour, especially given the current protests, but it's good to see that something has sparked this off. Here's a quote. While the Academy has made strides, we know that there's much work that needs to be done in order to ensure equitable opportunities across the board, Academy CEO Dawn Hudson said in a statement. The need to address the issue is urgent. To that end, we will amend and continue to examine our rules and procedures to ensure that all voices are heard and celebrated, end quote. Now, as somebody who, and listeners to this program know, that I am black, and so I do identify with those who have been discriminated against, and it's happened to me before. It always seems to me that the solution to this, it's hard to legislate a solution to not being discriminated against, especially on a subjective thing like the arts. You can have an affirmative action plan for something that's objective, such as getting into a college or, looking at government contract or something like that, in a system where discrimination just takes place and it's hard to change, so you have to enforce a rule. It's hard to enforce a rule for people judging art by saying, oh, you got to be inclusive, because I'll speak for myself as a black person, I would not like to see a black film or television show or musical piece or anything included in a nomination process if it's subpar. See, I'm not for inclusion just for the sake of inclusion. So it's very different to legislate. That's what I'll say. But I'm glad to see that they're trying to at least do something to change the status quo. To furthermore diverse representation at the Oscars, the Academy and the Producers Guild of America, it's known as the PGA, not the Pro Golfers Association, but the PGA, are creating a task force of industry leaders to develop and implement new representation and inclusion, standards for Oscar eligibility by July 31st, 2020. Again, number one, it's hard to come up with something that truly works and is fair to everyone. Number two, they're going to try to do this in less than 2 months. That's interesting. Also, beginning with the 94th Academy Awards, that's the 2021 Academy Awards, the Best Picture category will be set at 10 nominees rather than changing the number each year. Well, I'm glad to see that they're limiting it. When they decided to open it up, just because other genres felt like they were being not represented or not considered, I thought, again, they started including films for the purpose of inclusion, not because they were good films. So they threw like a couple of horror movies in there, a couple comedies that weren't necessarily great films, I thought. They did well at the box office usually, and that's how they got included. So I'm glad to see they're going to limit the nominations, and hopefully they'll get some people in there that will consider something a little wider. Here's another quote. Through the dedication, focus, and concerted effort of our board of governors and members of branch executive committees, the Academy has surpassed the goals of our A 2020 initiative. But to truly meet this moment, we must recognize how much more needs to be done, and we must listen, learn, and embrace the challenge and hold ourselves and our community accountable. Academy President David Rubin said, Academy leadership and our board are committed to ensuring that we continue to weave equity and inclusion into the fabric of every Academy initiative, committee, and program and event. Well, my suggestion to them is that whoever's on these committees, make the committee diverse. Because, listen, if there was a film, I will say, I am not Asian. I don't know anything about Asian culture. If somebody made a film about Asian culture that I thought was a good film, but it just really wasn't representative of what goes on in the Asian community, and there was an Asian member of that board who could point that out to me, I would appreciate that. I think that happens sometimes with art, and that represents my community. And I imagine there's people who may feel the same in others. So I would say strive for inclusion in the judging rather than inclusion in the art, and it'll all work out. Next, I'm going to talk about the Peabody Awards. We'll go over those winners. Go get something to drink. Go get some snacks. We got to pay some bills, and I'll be right back. All right. You ever won an award, Jack? I have. It was a while ago. And not for podcasting, let me tell you. I'd like to. All right, we're back. And I hope you found the last segment interesting about the inclusiveness in the awards of at least the SAG Awards and the Academy Awards. I find those things interesting, and I like this transition that we're going through. And that brings me right into what we're going to talk about now, the Peabody Awards, the latest winners. These are the winners for 2019. They made the nominations a little while ago, and now they have decided who wins. The Simpsons and Frontline, they were given the Peabody Awards top honor, and that's the institutional award. And pretty much, they give these awards out, at least in television, I've noticed. They give it out to high quality shows, but you got to stick around for a while, and you have to make a mark. And make a mark that has a brand. Like when you talk about The Simpsons have a brand now. It's a style. Just like Frontline. When you say, I saw a piece on Frontline, you kind of know what type of investigative journalism you're going to get. And so they should have been honored. I'm glad to see that they did. That recognition was announced on Wednesday along with this year's 30 Peabody Award winners. The programs included the Oprah Network's David Makes Man, Fleabag from Amazon, Rami, that's on Hulu. HBO always has a couple, Succession and Watchmen. They got recognized, and Stranger Things and When They See Us on Netflix. Now, among the 30 programs were selected, they were considered the most compelling and empowering stories released in broadcasting and digital media during 2019. That's what it means when you win a Peabody Award. That's what they're recognizing. That announcement comes after Monday's news that Cicely Tyson has been named winner of the Peabody Career Achievement Award. Now, due to COVID-19, there'll be no in-person Peabody Award ceremony this year. Originally, the event was scheduled to take place in Los Angeles on June 18th, which would have been the end of this coming week, but it's not going to happen. So I picked out a number. I didn't even count them. I had to weed through the 30 because I don't have time to go over all 30. And also, not all of them are really related to television. Some of them aren't, but I'm still going to mention them. But I'm going to start off with Chernobyl. And now, Chernobyl was an HBO miniseries about the nuclear meltdown disaster over in Russia. I did not watch that. Everyone I know who watched that show, without exception, said it was excellent. Again, if you've listened to me long enough, you know that, there's certain shows. I don't watch television. I watch serious stuff on television, but usually it's of the nonfiction variety or not the dramatic variety. If I'm going to watch something dramatic, whether it's based on factual or something that actually happened, or it's fictional, if it's sad or it's depressing, I usually will choose not to watch that, at least when it originally airs. That's the choice I made with Chernobyl. People are telling me I'm crazy, so not the first time I've heard that. I'm going to watch it. Also, David Makes Man, which I mentioned earlier, which is from the Oprah Winfrey Network. It's another series that I do not watch, but what it's about is David Makes Man follows a 14-year-old named David, and this is just how the synopsis describes it. From the projects, who is haunted by the death of his friend and relied on by his hardworking mother to find a way out of poverty. So, from those, I don't know a whole lot of people that watch this. Those that have said it's really good. I'm going to have to make time to maybe give it a peek. You just can't watch everything. And I haven't really latched on to anything on the Oprah Network, I'm sorry to say. My sister watches a few series and she really likes those. Queen Sugar's one that she watches. She hasn't watched this, at least she hasn't told me so. All right. Dickinson, which is on Apple TV. Dickinson takes place during Emily Dickinson's era with a modern sensibility and tone. It takes viewers into the world of Emily, audaciously exploring the constraints of society, gender, and family from the perspective of a budding writer that doesn't fit into her own time through her imaginative point of view. Dickinson is Emily's coming-of-age story, one woman's fight to get her voice heard. I've heard good things about Dickinson. The only Apple TV show that I've watched is Servant from M. Night Shyamalan. I criticize M. Night a lot because I think he lost his mojo a little while, but I think he got it back. He's got the swagger back. Servant is good, and I would recommend you watch that. Probably not deserving of a Peabody. This one apparently was. Fleabag on Prime Video. It's the Phoebe Waller-Bridge show that's based off of her one-woman show, which ran for several weeks on Broadway. This show has gotten several accolades, won an Emmy, I believe, won a Golden Globe, I know for sure, and has obviously won a Peabody Award. Have not watched this one either, friends. Hate to tell you. But the Phoebe Waller-Bridge show that I am currently watching, which she's associated with, which she created, and she writes some of the episodes, is Killing Eve, which I like. Again, maybe not Peabody worthy, but it's very good, and the acting on it is very good. And I do plan to watch Fleabag eventually. Rami, which comes from Hulu. Rami follows a first-generation American Muslim who's on a spiritual journey to his politically divided New Jersey neighborhood. It explores the challenges of what it's like being caught between an Egyptian community that thinks life is a moral test and a generation that thinks life has no consequences. Now, I've heard some great things about this series. I do plan to watch it. Again, haven't watched it yet. It's created by a gentleman named Rami Youssef. And I'd like to see it because from what I hear is it's probably one of the more realistic depictions of a Muslim American that we have on television. Don't have many of those. Most of them, unfortunately, are either terrorists or sheiks that are, oil barons and those types of things. So I would love to watch this show. I think one of the things that television can do for us, positive, it can do for us, it can give us a glimpse into places, into worlds, and the types of people that we aren't able to in our normal lives, or maybe not taking the opportunity to do so. And so I need to watch it, and I would recommend maybe you give it a peek too. Also on the list is Stranger Things. Stranger Things, Netflix show. I have not watched all of the seasons. I started watching season 1, as I've shared on this program before. I'm not a fan of the child or even preteen driven show. So I checked out, especially when Winona Ryder started talking to the blinking lights on the wall. And I was happy. I'm very happy that she has found success. She's been in a lot of successful things. She was in The Plot Against America, which you should watch. It's very good. This show, though, is one I do not watch, but it is wildly popular, and I'm extremely happy for those people who put these things together. and I'll say this every show too. Just because I don't watch a show, I'll never tell anyone not to, because people work hard to put these shows together. Even the worst show was work for somebody. And so I'm happy when these things catch on, even if they're not my cup of tea. They're somebody's cup of tea, and they're definitely somebody's meal ticket. So I'm glad to see this was successful. Next, HBO show, Succession. This is a show that I just didn't have time to put on I watched it in the beginning. It was very good. It is very good. My sister is addicted to the show. She loves it. Several of my friends love it. The critics love it. I can't put it in my schedule yet. So I'm happy to put this on the shelf because I know it's there, and it, probably will just be just as good when I get to it. But it was good enough for Peabody. So obviously they thought it was worth recognizing. Unbelievable. Now, this is on Netflix. This is a dramatization of the 2008-2011 Washington and Colorado serial rape cases. Unbelievable follows Marie, a teenager who was charged with lying about having been raped, and the two detectives who followed a twisting path to arrive at the truth. I didn't finish watching this series. Again, it was a time thing. It wasn't a quality thing. It had Toni Collette in it. I love Toni Collette. She is an actress that there's some actors and actresses I won't watch. I'm not inclined to watch what they're in because I'm not fans of theirs. Toni Collette is the opposite. If Toni Collette's in something, I am definitely giving it a try. This was very good. I plan to go back to it. Didn't have time. Next is a show that I reviewed on this podcast, Watchmen. Watchmen was, it was a project that was taken up by Damon Lindelof on HBO. It's a sequel to the Alan Moore comic. Probably one of the best. If you're ranking graphic novels, Watchmen has to be in your top 3. If it's not number 1, regardless of what type of graphic comic you like, this one almost made a graphic comic. This one made long comic books into graphic novels. He almost defined what the graphic novel is with Watchmen. Watchmen was made into a movie. The movie was disappointing for those of us who are fans of the book. This is what I'll say about the movie, because again, I'm not going to tell you not to watch the movie. What I'll tell you is that it doesn't do the book justice, and they do make some changes, as movies are wont to do, that I think devalued the story. However, the special effects, it's a beautiful movie to watch. It is a stunning movie to watch. And for that reason, I would recommend people watch it. Just don't watch it if you've never read the graphic novel and you watch this movie, Watchmen. Don't think that that's what you watch it. You might say, well, what was the big deal about the graphic novel? No, the story in the graphic novel is 50 times better than the movie. This sequel was very daring for Damon Lindelof to try to pull off, because not only did he not create these characters, they're Alan Moore characters. Alan Moore was not associated with this production, but he did it in a very respectful way, in a very unique way, took the plot directions I don't think anybody would have imagined, and it was quite powerful. So I strongly recommend Watchmen. I understand why it won this Peabody Award, and I'm happy to see that it was on the list. Next is a Netflix miniseries, When They See Us. It was about the Central Park 5 trial. Central Park 5, that sad story about the 5 black men who were unjustly jailed for a rape that they didn't commit. It's been in the news a lot because our president, when he was a private citizen, was very vocal about how he wanted these guys jailed. The series was supposed to be very good. This is something I didn't watch. Again, as I said before, I knew that this was going to bring up some feelings in me, and I just wasn't at the time ready to watch it. I will watch it, especially since it's been recognized in this way, but I just didn't want to be angry that day. It came out, and I never went back to it. Next, there were documentaries. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. The documentary Apollo 11 from CNN won a Peabody. One called For Sama, which is a film that marks the 5 years of a marketing student's life in Syria before the Battle of Aleppo. That will be very powerful. It was a Frontline documentary. Again, I mentioned Frontline before. Surviving R. Kelly, which is on Lifetime. I'm not laughing because of the subject matter. R. Kelly is a He's a repugnant human being, if you ask me. A great artist, apparently, great songwriter, great vocalist. But I am quite surprised that I thought this was going to be more of like a hard copy type of series, something that was a scandal sheet type of thing. And apparently it was done quite well, and it got a Peabody Award. So Surviving R. Kelly, if you're into that story, if you're never got around to seeing it, go watch it. The Edge of Democracy, it's about the political atmosphere in Brazil, won a Peabody. True Justice, about Bryan Stevenson's fight for equality. That was on HBO. Documentary. Bryan Stevenson is a lawyer, social justice activist. And it tells his story and what he's had to go through to do what he does. Now, they have a podcast / radio category that wins Peabodys. I didn't see this podcast didn't get on it, nor was I on it. I was shocked. I know you're shocked too, but really quickly, Dolly Parton's America, which is out of WNYC Studios, won a Peabody. Have you heard George's podcast from BBC Sounds? Won. In the Dark, The Path Home, won a Peabody. And Threshold, The Refuge, won a Peabody. I have not heard of any of those last three podcasts. I've heard of Dolly Parton's America. Have not heard it. Not a country music fan. I admire Dolly Parton, but not a fan of her music either. So that's it. Those are the Peabody Awards. Those are the winners. If you have any questions for me or you want to make a comment about it, please email me at podcasthoward@gmail.com. I'll read all emails on the air. Next, I'm going to talk about this upcoming movie season. Some movies that got pushed back that some people think might end up going to streaming. And also J.K. Rowling. Don't go away. Go get a refill. I'll be right back. All right. You ready to hear the movies, Jack? I don't know if I'm ready, but they're going to be opening up. All right. Here is some breaking news about Tenet and Wonder Woman. Tenet, Christopher Nolan's highly anticipated espionage thriller, has pushed back its theatrical debut by 2 weeks. Again, they pushed it back, ending months of speculation about whether or not the $200 million tentpole movie would hold on to its mid-July release date. The Warner Brothers film, which stars John David Washington and Robert Pattinson, John David Washington is Denzel's son, good actor, was initially slated for July 17th and will now debut in cinemas on July 31st. On the date that Tenet was expected to open, theaters will re-release one of Nolan's biggest hits, Inception, to honor its 10th anniversary. Now, this is what I think. I think that they don't, and rightfully so, the Tenet was going to be a big hit. I have no doubt about that. And I don't think the movies have a doubt about it either, the studio. And that's why they invested $200 million in it. And the last thing they want to do is put it out there and have it flounder because no one can go in the movies. So what they're going to do is this was smart. They're going to put Inception in the theaters in mid-July. And they're going to see how it does. Inception is a Nolan movie. It's the type of movie that people who, Inception has enough fans. They could have done this with The Dark Knight too, in my opinion, but The Dark Knight's been all over cable so much. They put Inception in there in the theaters, and if it does well, and I'm sure they have a number, if it does a number that reaches a threshold, then they're going to go forward with Tenet in July 31st. But mark my words, if they put Inception in the theaters and Inception doesn't do as well as they figure it should do, Tenet's going to be moved back again. It is. Warner Brothers also postponed Wonder Woman 1984, nearly 2 months from August 14th is when it was supposed to open until October 2nd. This marks the second shift for the superhero sequel. That's directed by Patty Jenkins, and it stars Wonder Woman 2, Gal Gadot, Linda Carter's Wonder Woman 1. The film was originally set to kick off summer on June 5th, but it was delayed until August once theaters began to close due to the coronavirus epidemic. Nolan, he's one of the most ardent supporters of the big screen experience. I am a big Christopher Nolan fan. I think he knows how to utilize the movie theater experience better than many directors do today. You know, he doesn't fool around a lot with 3D. He does fool around with sound, or I would say fool around with sound. He does know how to use sound in a theater, in an auditorium, and he also knows how to use every bit of widescreen, which I appreciate. He was hoping that Tenet would usher audiences back into theaters. After the epidemic, he was hoping that, well, maybe this will be the thing that will get people to come when they might be hesitant to go to the theaters for a lesser movie. Most of the theaters closed across the country since the middle of March to help curb the global health crisis. Though some states have started to reopen cinemas, major movie theater chains like AMC, Regal, and Cinemark don't have plans to resume business until late in the summer. When they are able to restart shop, though, it's unclear how willing audiences will be to return to the movies. Though Tenet was slightly shifted back, Warner Brothers believes that more theaters will be open by the end of July. And that's why they're doing the experiment with Inception, in my opinion. While other major studios shifted, delayed, amended plans to premiere their movies, Warner Brothers long held firm that Tenet would maintain its release date. However, the studio reignited doubts that Tenet would debut as planned when it launched a new trailer last month, which was on YouTube. I don't know if you all saw it. Great trailer that conspicuously lacked an opening date. It didn't say opening, as they usually do at the end, what dates you can look forward to. It didn't have any of that. Here's a quote. Quote, "We are excited our partners at Warner Brothers will offer a new generation of film fans the opportunity to enjoy Inception the way it was originally intended to be seen, on the big screen." The National Association of Theater Owners, the Exhibition Industries Trade Union Association, organization, said in a statement. That statement, I'm sure, was released by our man, John Fithian, who I chide often on this podcast. He's the guy that threw down the gauntlet and Universal said that Universal shouldn't be banned, and AMC and Cinemark took them up on that and said they're not going to run Universal stuff because they stream Trolls World Tours. So stupid. Here's another quote, though, from him. Quote, "Over these last months, we have been keeping Warner Brothers closely informed of our work toward reopening our theaters in accordance with governmental health and safety regulations. And we are looking forward to audiences enjoying Tenet in our theaters all around the world on July 31st. End quote. So they love Warner Brothers because Warner Brothers is still going to put these movies in the theaters. Let me remind John Fithian again, and you all have heard this from me if you listen. Tenet, as we said in the very beginning of this, cost $200 million to make. Plus, it is made for the big screen. They're not doing the theater owners any favor by putting it in the theaters. They want to get their money back, and this is what the movie's going to be wasted on the small screen. I guarantee you, if Tenet was a movie that was just simply a regular old action movie or just a movie that dealt with dialogue or something like that, or a horror movie, Warner Brothers would probably screen this thing if the theaters are still closed by mid-July, or they put Inception in the theaters and no one came to see it. They would just stream it because they need to make their money back. So I don't know why this guy, I understand he wants people to go into theaters because he represents the theater owners. So he's doing his job. But man, oh man, it's just crazy that the theater owners of America, they need to come to grips with the fact that they need to set up a new paradigm, and they need to start making alliances with streaming companies or something. So they have to figure out a way that they can make the theater experience more attractive to people, especially since people who were reflectively or just would normally go to the theater to go see a movie, and not go to video on demand. Now that they've done the video on demand thing, many of them are like, hey, this is not too bad. I can do this, and I can order pizza, and I can stop it and go to the bathroom. I can do whatever I want to do. And I can watch this at my leisure on my huge flat screen. This is not, and not have to listen to somebody talking on the other aisle or deal with somebody texting while I'm doing this. Or if my daughter is texting in the other room or across from there, she's not distracting me, because that's what she does anyway. So this is just, I don't know. Don't get me started on John Fithian, as you know. Now, Disney's remake of Mulan, which is the first major film to reignite movie-going when it debuts on July 24th. Before that, two smaller movies, Russell Crowe's thriller Unhinged from Solstice Studios and Sony's romance drama The Broken Hearts Gallery, are slated to launch in theaters on July 10th. Russell Crowe's movie is a good example of what I'm talking about. That movie, Unhinged, would go on video on demand if theaters are affected. If we have another spike or something, theaters close before July 10th, or it's like The Invisible Man, if it starts running and theaters have to close in mid-July, they'll put that straight on video on demand. Unhinged does not have to be on the big screen. Since those films are both modestly budgeted, they give theater owners the opportunity to show fresh content on the big screen with less risk for their financial backers. Okay, that is true. That's why they might put them in the theater. But I guarantee if people don't go to the theaters, they're going straight to video on demand. Over the past few months, Warner Brothers overhauled much of its upcoming slate, shifting around titles like Lin-Manuel Miranda's musical In the Heights, Robert Pattinson's The Batman, Scoob, an animated film based on Scooby-Doo characters, skipped its planned release in theaters and instead debuted on digital rental services. Nolan, whose credits include the Dark Knight trilogy and Interstellar, wrote and directed Tenet, about a secret agent tasked with preventing another world war. Like most directors' movies, plot details, they have been intentionally kept under wraps. Also, there's going to be in this movie is Elizabeth Debicki, which I would look forward to seeing on the big screen. I like her on the little screen too. And Kenneth Branagh. Wonder Woman 1984 is the follow-up to the 2017 critical commercial hit Wonder Woman. It follows Diana Prince in the 1980s as the Amazonian warrior who goes toe-to-toe with two formidable foes, Maxwell Lord, who's played by Pedro Pascal, and Cheetah, played by Kristen Wiig, while reuniting her with her past love, Steve Trevor, played by Chris Pine. The cast also includes Robin Wright and Connie Nielsen. So I look forward to Wonder Woman and Tenet. They're going to hold those out until people go to the theaters because they're made for big screens. Anything else, and Mulan, anything else could possibly be on your television soon. Coming to a television near you soon. Here is some breaking news from Hogwarts. Amid a growing storm of protest over J.K. Rowling's recent tweets about transgender people, the Harry Potter author posted a 3,600-word essay to her website on Wednesday defending her decision to speak out on trans issues. In a lengthy piece, Rowling also discusses her first violent marriage, and she is, quote, a domestic abuse and sexual assault survivor. Quote, I'm mentioning these things now, not in an attempt to garner sympathy, but out of solidarity with the huge numbers of women who have histories like mine, who have been slurred as bigots for having concerns around single-sex spaces, end quote, Rowling writes. An example of one of her controversial comments is, quote, as many women have said before me, woman, quote, is not a costume. Woman is not an idea in a man's head. Rowling's decision to defend her views on trans people comes as actors, including Daniel Radcliffe and Eddie Redmayne, in the Harry Potter and Fantastic Beasts movie series, part of Rowling's larger Wizarding World creative empire, have spoken out in support of trans rights and in direct opposition to Rowling's stated beliefs. GLAAD, the LGBTQ media watchdog organization, responded to Rowling's essay with a statement late Wednesday. Quote, it seems JK is good at only one thing, writing fantasy. Her misinformed and dangerous missive about transgender people flies in the face of medical and psychological experts and devalues trans people's accounts of their own lives. She is sowing divisiveness at a time when real leaders are driving toward unity. And to all the trans and cisgender youth raised on her books who are now loudly speaking up in support of the trans people you know and love, you are the future, and we can't wait to read and watch the beautiful art you will create, end quote. Now, this issue is way more complex than I have time to give it, especially since this is supposed to be a podcast about television, right? But I thought I would bring it up because J.K. Rowling is a huge name in fiction and film media. Yet, she's received, and maybe rightfully so, or rightfully so in my opinion, to be quite honest, huge pushback from many of her highest profile collaborators, from Harry Potter himself to Steve Kloves, or Clovis. I don't know how he pronounces his name. I'll just call him Kloves. He's the screenwriter, and he was a producer on Harry Potter and Fantastic Beasts. He collaborates with her often, and he came out and he had some pretty strong things to say about her. Now, see, I'm a journalist, and I'm all for free speech. So I support J.K. Rowling freely speaking her mind. I support anybody doing that, as long as you're not making an open threat to somebody, something like that. However, there's a big however, when you do so, you have to be prepared to be accountable for what you've expressed. So my advice to you, my listeners and my friends, is to treat Twitter like what it is. Twitter is a megaphone that can be heard throughout every bit of the universe we inhabit. Okay? So if the message you want to send is critical of others, so much so that it may bring harm to them, you better believe in it so deep in your bones that it's part of your DNA. So what I would recommend is that you take a deep breath before you hit send, because some things just don't need to be said on Twitter. I'm not saying J.K. Rowling can't speak her mind. I mean, my gosh, she's a great writer. She can express herself way better than I can. But some things don't need to be said, especially on Twitter. That's all. So next, I have some news about the show Hightown, which I've been, recapping, and I'll do my recap on Billions, episode 7. Go get a refill. Be right back. Thank you very much for listening. All right, the home stretch. Talking about all my shows. Hightown. That's what we're going to be talking about to start off. Hightown. It's, I'll recap it in the next episode, but it's a little shaky, but they got some good news this past week. The crime drama Hightown has been renewed for a second season at Starz. The premium cable channel announced on Thursday. The news comes after the series had aired just 4 episodes, and with the first episode having aired on May 17th. Per Starz, the series premiere set viewership records across Starz OTT platforms. That means the streaming platforms. In the Nielsen Live 7-day ratings, the show averaged about 1.5 million viewers per episode, which is pretty phenomenal. That's good. I was excited about it. That's why I said I was going to recap it. I don't think it is so good that they should make the decision to renew it after only 4 episodes, but I guess, if the ratings are there, they're there. I'm going to give you a little recap for those of you who have never listened to the show. Hightown is set on Cape Cod, actually a little community that's off Cape Cod. It follows Jackie Quinones. Actress Monica Raymond plays her. She's a hard-partying National Marine Fisheries Service agent. She's a fish police who has her freewheeling life thrown into disarray when she discovers a body on the beach, another casualty of Cape Cod's opioid epidemic. As a result of this trauma, Jackie takes the first steps toward being sober until she becomes convinced that it's up to her to solve the murder. Now, there's a quote from Starz. Rebecca, Gary, Jerry, those are the showrunners, delivered an elevated and well-executed drama that embodies all the hallmarks of Starz premium series with its dynamic, edgy storytelling, multicultural cast, and female leadership both in front of and behind the camera, said Christina Davis, president of original programming at Starz. Quote, audiences are already deeply engaged with these flawed and complex characters, and in a second season, we will continue to dive deeper into relationships between them amidst the shifting tides on the Cape. Well, I would disagree with her on a couple of those things. On paper, the plot that I just described to you before that quote, and then her quote talking about the very interesting characters and diverse characters, all that on paper is true. And so it should be a very interesting series. But to my taste, to my perception, and to a lot of the things I've read, because I read, many of the shows, reviews of the shows that I talk about on this show, just to see what the general consensus is. I always give you my opinion, but I want to see what the consensus is that the characters are you just don't care about them. You should. It seems like, it's like when you have a recipe and you make the cake and it just doesn't taste like anything. It doesn't taste like it was supposed to taste. Well, that's what I think they have right here. Now, they could right the ship. They do have all the ingredients. I will say that. So hopefully they'll be able to, maybe get some better writers or do something differently. The actors seem competent. They're very capable if they had some decent material to work with. So maybe they'll get it up and running. It's probably as a person working on the show, a showrunner and a writer, obviously an actor, it gives you some comfort to know that you have another season to go. So maybe you can really kind of take a deep breath and really get into these characters that you're playing now, knowing that you're going to have some time to develop them. But I'm not really overwhelmingly impressed with Hightown. That said, I'll be recapping this latest episode of Hightown, which aired last night. I'm recording this on a Monday, in the next podcast I do, which should drop next Friday. Now on to Billions. Now, because of the pandemic, Billions had to shut down production, just like everything in Hollywood and in New York, for a period of time. And so they stopped right after this episode 7, and they're calling this a mid-season finale. So next week, I will not be recapping Billions. Some of you are probably applauding. And I don't know what I'm going to do in that segment. Probably I'll just do straight show. Again, many of you think that's probably for the best. But as mid-season finales go, it's almost tradition that it ends on a cliffhanger because they want you coming back. That's not the case in this Billions. It just signifies the start of a battle. They kind of built it up to a climax, and it wasn't a cliffhanger, but I'll get more into detail. Bobby Axelrod, who's played by Damian Lewis, versus Mike Prince, who's the new character this year, played by Corey Stoll. That's what they set up. Now, they've been moving toward this all season. I mean, they opened up the season with them both obviously being rivals, but this is what they've set up now. This, Bobby Axelrod throwing down the gauntlet and saying, I'm going to destroy this guy. This time it's personal, in other words. By the second half of the episode, it's clear that the financial drama shot this chapter probably when COVID-19 just hit the U.S. and they realized that they were going to have to shut down. They make use of the pandemic and drop it in different lines and tie it up as a disease that never leaves. From productivity-enhancing drugs, geopolitical landscape surveys, and Chuck, who's played by Paul Giamatti, Chuck's personal issues, this episode has it all. Now, they talk about, the title of the episode is The Limitless Shit. Okay, and it's an allusion to a movie starring Bradley Cooper where he has this performance-enhancing drug, not necessarily athletically performance-enhancing, but intellectually performance-enhancing. And they have a drug called Vigilantrix that's introduced in this episode, and it's a drug that dials the senses up to 11, pretty much. I was going to say 10, but no, to 11. And that means increasing human productivity by leaps and bounds. So this is Adderall plus, for some. Literally every member of Axe Cap and Taylor Mason Carbon pop a few of these Villanetrix pills, and what follows is some intense and insane moves that an already high on the red pill Axe approves. You know, Axe takes one of these pills, he gets hit by this, you know, great surge of energy, and he just decides, hey, we're going to go down there, I'm going to give these pills out to all of my guys, and go out there and let's make some deals that are going to blow the world away. And so he says yes, and he proves all these things really without a second thought, all on a hunch that they would stand to make billions of dollars on investments in the mineral market, which could work, but it's like a putting all of your chips in the center of the table. It's like an all or nothing move. It could blow the whole thing up if it doesn't work, which is not really the best way to go about trading or gambling on things. This trading is to a certain extent, but you do it with some research. It does eventually take Taylor, who is played by the very interesting Asia Kate Dillon, who we talked about in the first segment. She's non-binary, or they are non-binary. Excuse me, Asia. I'm still getting used to it. To knock some sense into Axe as he calls off the drug-driven move to make more money. Taylor salvages enough, but gets on Axe's bad side after revealing the plan to work with Mike Prince that she made in the beginning of the episode on a tin project, which has become, and when I call it a tin project, that's not a descriptor. It's literally about the mining of tin that has become the cause of stress across the supply chain honchos. Mike plays a longer game by putting an end to the operations, and that makes Axe mad enough to know that Mike, without going into any intricate details, he played Taylor Mason Carbon to take a hit, which is under the Axe Cap umbrella. So therefore, if Taylor loses out, Axe's bottom line goes down, and he has backdoored Axe Cap into taking a loss. So that's one of the reasons why he throws down, the main reason why he throws down the gauntlet at the end of the episode. As for Wendy, played by the beautiful Maggie Siff, the relationship with Nico Tanner, the artist, played by Frank Grillo, who does an excellent job, goes full tilt south when Axe has been very busy in this episode, sabotages her evening with a display of the artist's latest work. This may have caused a dent, and only time will tell if Axe's intention is to separate Wendy from the artist or use it as a ruse to get her closer to him, because he's always had this strange relationship with Wendy that was almost like they, you know, how you talk about office marriages, they're almost married and quite intimate intellectually and emotionally. And so Wendy, now that she has divorced from Chuck and Axe the same, is single, they may get together. We shall see. He seemed very jealous when she started dating this artist. Now let's get to my man Paul Giamatti. Chuck Rhodes might not have been the star of this episode, but that doesn't stop him from playing a crucial role in this episode, The Limitless Doo-Doo. As he interacts with Dr. Swerdlow, a doctor with some unorthodox, that means shady, treatment methods. He's trying to get a kidney for his dad. With Rhodes Sr., played by Jeffrey DeMunn, suffering from renal failure, and the possibility of a donor getting bleaker by the day, Swerdlow comes in as a man with some contacts who can help. While Chuck dismisses the idea without a second thought, because you have to do a lot of shady things to get an organ, as you can imagine, he's forced to go back to the doctor, though, to get his father treated because it's becoming grave. Swerdlow, who's played by the actor Rick Hoffman, who is excellent. I mean, he usually plays this, he played this guy, Louis Litt, in the series Suits, who was kind of a goofy character. And this guy, Swerdlow, is he's just low life. And he plays the heck out of it. It was probably one of the best parts of this show. The thing the showrunners of Billions do very well is they either have a guest actor play directly against type of a character they made famous in another show, which they did in this case, or they just cast the perfect actor. They have a great casting director, whoever that person is, and they do a good job. It's one of the best things about Billions, if you're a fan of the show, is are the actors they bring on to the show to play supporting roles. Speaking of Chuck, he does manage a moral win by getting the Secretary of Treasury, Todd Krakow, played by Danny Strong, to resign. In an attempt to build a legal case, Kate Sackler, who's played by the lovely Condola Rashad, and Chuck, they very subtly threaten Krakow, who accuses the Treasury of being corrupt, and he gets kicked out of his position, especially after referring to the members of the corrupt mindset as the coronavirus. He calls the whole cabinet like the coronavirus. What does that mean? It means that Axe is back to square one in trying to get his bank. That's why that was very important, and that's why Chuck set him up to quit. So a lot of wheeling and dealing going on in this episode, but it was very good. This episode might not have been the hard-hitting mid-season finale that some might have hoped for, but it does pack a punch. I enjoyed it very much. This episode ended where the story could go anywhere, and that's a really good thing. So that when Billions picks up again, we're going to be ready for some really... it could go anywhere, and you're not waiting to see whether, who killed JR, or if the guy who falls out the window falls into the dumpster or goes splat on the street. So that's about it for now. Like I said, next episode I will be recapping Hightown, unless that goes completely dry, and then I'll just find a whole new set of shows to go over. I want to thank you for listening to the GSMC podcast, television podcast, brought to you by the mighty GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write us a really nice review. Give us 5 stars. That really helps us. Also, if you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, that helps us as well. Please remember to email me at podcasthoward@gmail.com with any requests for the show or anything you want me to cover or any feedback. I read all emails on the show, and I love to get them. Listen, I know we're in some strange times right now. Let's all try to pull through this together. We are in a worldwide pandemic, so please wash your hands, limit your interaction with people if you can, and wear a mask when you go out of the house. This was the first show of our new format where I have 4 segments rather than 6. Hopefully that you like it. I like it better. Hopefully you like it too. Join me next time on Friday. That's when my next podcast drops. Until then, check out my new podcast, Vino and Convo with Fletch and Couch. It's on Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to this podcast. We're doing a rewatch of all 60 episodes of The Wire. I think you'll really like it. And if you don't, please email me and tell me that you don't, and we'll try to improve it. Thanks again for listening. See you next time. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts television podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts podcast network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts podcast network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.